What is Art? By Leo Tolstoy. Chapter 17. Art is one of the two organs of human progress. Through words, a person shares thoughts. Through the images of art, a person shares feelings, and shares them with all people, not only the people of the present, but the people of the past and the future. It belongs to human nature to use both these organs of communion, and so the perversion of even one of them is bound to bring harmful consequences to the society in which the perversion has taken place. Those consequences must be of two kinds. First, the absence in that society of the activity which the organ ought to perform. Second, the harmful activity of the perverted organ. And these are exactly the consequences that have appeared in our society. The organ of art has been perverted, and so the society of the upper classes has been deprived to a great extent of the activity which that organ ought to have performed. Two things have spread through our society on an enormous scale. On the one hand, counterfeits of art, which serve only to amuse people and to corrupt them. On the other hand, the works of an insignificant, exclusive art, valued as the highest art. Between them they have perverted in most of the people of our society the capacity to be infected by true works of art, and have thereby robbed them of any chance of knowing the highest feelings humanity has reached, feelings that can be carried to people by art alone. All the best that humanity has made in art remains foreign to people who have lost the capacity to be infected by art. In its place they take false counterfeits of art, or an insignificant art which they mistake for the real thing. The people of our time and our society are delighted with Baudelaire's, Verlaine's, Moraes's, Ibsen's, and Maeterlinck's in poetry, with Monet's, Manet's, Puvis de Chavannes, Burne-Jones's, Stuck's, and Boeklin's in painting, with Wagner's, Liszt's, and Richard Strauss's in music, and so on. And they are no longer able to understand either the highest art or the simplest. Among the upper classes, because the capacity to be infected by works of art has been lost, people grow up, are educated, and live without the softening, enriching action of art, and so they do not move towards perfection, they do not grow kinder. On the contrary, while their outward means grow highly developed, they themselves become ever more savage, more coarse, and more cruel. That is the consequence of the missing activity of a necessary organ in our society. The consequences of the perverted activity of that organ are more harmful still, and there are many of them. The first consequence, and the one that strikes the eye at once, is the enormous waste of working people's labor on something that is not merely useless, but for the most part harmful. And beyond that, the waste of human lives on this needless and evil business, a waste that can never be made good. It is dreadful to think with what strain, with what deprivation, millions of people work. People who have neither the time nor the means to provide what they and their families need, and who spend 10, 12, 14 hours a night setting the type of supposedly artistic books that spread vice among people, or who labor for the theaters, the concerts, the exhibitions, and the galleries, which mostly serve the same vice. But the most dreadful thought of all is this: living, good children, capable of every kind of goodness, are given over from their earliest years to certain tasks, for 10 or 15 years, 6, 8, 10 hours a day. Some play scales, some twist their limbs, walk on their toes and lift their legs above their heads, some sing solfeggios. Some contort themselves in every possible way and recite verses. Some draw from busts and from the naked model and paint studies. Some write compositions according to the rules of certain periods. And in these occupations unworthy of a human being, often carried on long after they are fully grown, they lose every physical and mental power and every understanding of life. People say it is dreadful and pitiful to look at little acrobats throwing their legs behind their necks. It is no less pitiful to look at 10-year-old children giving concerts, and more pitiful still to look at 10-year-old schoolboys who know by heart the exceptions to the Latin grammar. But it is not only that these people are deformed in body and mind, they are deformed in their moral nature, and become incapable of anything that people really need. Taking on the role of entertainers of the rich, they lose all sense of human dignity. They work up in themselves such a craving for public praise that they suffer constantly from an unsatisfied vanity, swollen in them to the size of a disease, and they spend all the powers of their souls on nothing but feeding that craving. And the most tragic thing of all is this: these people, ruined for life in the name of art, do art no good whatever. They do it the greatest harm. In the academies, the schools, and the conservatories, they are taught how to counterfeit art, and as they learn it, they are so perverted that they lose entirely the capacity to produce real art, and become the suppliers of the counterfeit, the insignificant and the depraved art that fills our world. That is the first consequence of the perversion of the organ of art, and it strikes the eye at once. The second consequence is this: the works of art as amusement, which the army of professional artists turns out in such appalling quantities, make it possible for the rich people of our time to live a life that is not only unnatural, but flatly opposed to the very principles of humanity that these same people profess. It would be impossible to live as the rich and idle live, especially the women, far from nature, far from animals, in artificial conditions, with muscles wasted away or grotesquely developed by gymnastics, and with the energy of life weakened. It would be impossible if there were not the thing called art, the entertainment and the amusement that turns their eyes away from the senselessness of their lives and saves them from the boredom that gnaws at them. Take away from all these people their theaters, their concerts, their exhibitions, their piano playing, their songs and their novels, which they occupy themselves with in the sure belief that such occupations are highly refined and aesthetic and therefore good. Take away from the patrons of art, the people who buy pictures, protect musicians and keep company with writers, their role as protectors of the great cause of art. They would not be able to go on with their lives. They would all perish of boredom, of misery, of the knowledge that their lives are senseless and wrong. It is only the occupation with what passes among them for art that lets them break every natural condition of life and still go on living, never noticing the senselessness and the cruelty of what they do. This propping up of the false life of the rich is the second consequence of the perversion of art, and it is no small one. The third consequence of the perversion of art is the confusion it creates in the minds of children and of ordinary people. People who have not been perverted by the false theories of our society, working people and children, have a very clear idea of what a person may be honored and praised for. In the understanding of the people and of children, there are only two grounds for praising and exalting anyone. There is physical strength, Hercules, the heroes of the old songs, the conquerors, and there is moral, spiritual strength, Shakyamuni, who leaves his beautiful wife and his kingdom to save humanity, or Christ, who goes to the cross for the truth he professes, and all the martyrs and the saints. Both kinds are plain to the people and to children. They understand that physical strength must be respected, because it forces respect, and an uncorrupted person cannot help respecting the moral strength of goodness, because his whole spiritual being is drawn towards it. And then these same people, children and workers, suddenly see that besides those who are praised, honored, and rewarded for physical strength and for moral strength, there are others who are praised, exalted and rewarded on a far greater scale than the heroes of strength and goodness, and rewarded only because they sing well, or write verses, or dance. They see that singers, writers, painters, and dancers make millions, and are given greater honor than the saints. And the ordinary people and the children are bewildered. 50 years after Pushkin's death, cheap editions of his works were spread among the people, and at the same time a monument to him was put up in Moscow. I then received more than 10 letters from various peasants asking why Pushkin had been so exalted. Only the other day, a literate townsman from Saratov came to see me. He had plainly lost his reason over this very question, and he was walking to Moscow to denounce the clergy for helping to put up a monument to Mr. Pushkin. Imagine the position of such a man from the people. From the newspapers and the rumors that reach him, he learns that in Russia the clergy, the authorities, and all the best people are unveiling, with great ceremony, a monument to a great man, a benefactor, the glory of Russia, Pushkin, of whom he has never heard a word. He reads or hears of it from every side, and he supposes that if such honors are paid to a man, then the man must have done something extraordinary, something strong or something good. He tries to find out who Pushkin was. He learns that Pushkin was not a hero of the old songs, and not a general, but a private person and a writer. From this he concludes that Pushkin must have been a holy man and a teacher of goodness, and he hurries to read his life and his works, or to hear about them. And what must his bewilderment be when he learns that Pushkin was a man of more than loose morals, that he died in a duel, that is, in an attempt to kill another man, and that his whole merit consists in having written poems about love, often very indecent ones. That a hero of the old songs was great, or Alexander of Macedon, or Genghis Khan or Napoleon, he can understand because each of them could have crushed him and 1,000 men like him. That Buddha, Socrates, and Christ were great, he can also understand because he knows and feels that he and all people ought to be like them. But why a man should be great for writing poems about the love of women, that he cannot understand. The same thing must be going on in the head of a Breton or a Norman peasant who learns that a monument, a statue like the statue of the Mother of God, is being put up to Baudelaire, and who then reads or is told what is in the flowers of evil. Or still more astonishing, a monument to Verlaine, when he learns what a wretched and dissolute life that man led, and reads his verses. And what confusion must arise in the heads of the common people when they learn that some Patti or Taglioni is paid 100,000 for a season, or a painter as much for a picture, and the writers of novels describing love scenes more than that again. The same thing happens with children. I remember living through this astonishment and this bewilderment myself, and I remember how I made my peace with the praise heaped on artists, as though they stood level with heroes and with the heroes of goodness. I made my peace with it only by lowering in my own mind the value of moral worth, and by granting to works of art a false and unnatural importance. And that is what happens in the soul of every child and of every ordinary person who learns of the strange honors and rewards handed to artists. That is the third consequence of the false attitude our society takes towards art. The fourth consequence of that attitude is this. The people of the upper classes run up against the contradiction between beauty and goodness more and more often, and they set the ideal of beauty above the ideal of goodness, and so release themselves from the demands of morality. These people reverse the roles. Instead of admitting, as they should, that the art they serve is a thing left behind by the world, they declare that morality is the thing left behind, a thing that can have no meaning for people standing at the height of development at which they imagine themselves to stand. This consequence of the false attitude to art has been showing itself in our society for a long time, but lately, with its prophet Nietzsche, with his followers, and with the decadents and the English aesthetes who agree with him, it has been expressed with quite exceptional insolence. The decadents and the aesthetes, people like Oscar Wilde, take as the theme of their works the denial of morality and the praise of vice. This art has partly given birth to a philosophy of the same kind and partly coincided with it. Not long ago I received from America a book called The Survival of the Fittest, or Philosophy of Power, 1897, by Ragnar Redbeard, Chicago, 1896. The substance of the book, as the publisher's preface puts it, is this: to measure good by the false philosophy of the Jewish prophets and the weeping messiahs is madness. Right is the child not of doctrine but of power. All laws, all commandments, all teachings about not doing to another what you would not have done to you have no force in themselves. They get their force from the club, the prison, and the sword. A truly free man is bound to obey no command, human or divine. Obedience is the mark of the degenerate. Disobedience is the mark of the hero. People should not be tied down by traditions invented by their enemies. The whole world is a slippery battlefield. Ideal justice means that the defeated shall be exploited, tormented, and despised. The free and the brave can conquer the whole world, and therefore there must be an eternal war for life, for land, for love, for women, for power, for gold. Something similar was said a few years ago by that celebrated and refined academician Vogüé. The earth and its treasures are the booty of the bold. The author has plainly come, on his own and quite apart from Nietzsche, and without knowing it, to the very conclusions which the new artists profess. Set out in the form of a doctrine, these propositions shock us, but in essence they are already contained in the ideal of an art that serves beauty. The art of our upper classes has brought up people in this ideal of the Superman, which is in essence the old ideal of Nero, of Stenka Razin, of Genghis Khan, of Robert Macaire, of Napoleon, and of all their accomplices, their hangers-on and their flatterers, and it works with all its strength to fix that ideal in them. Here, in this replacing of the ideal of morality by the ideal of beauty, that is, of pleasure, lies the fourth and terrible consequence of the perversion of art in our society. It is frightening to think what would become of humanity if such an art spread through the mass of the people, and it is already beginning to spread. The fifth consequence, and the chief one, is this. The art that flourishes among the upper classes of European society corrupts people directly, by infecting them with the feelings most evil and most harmful to humanity, the feelings of superstition, of patriotism, and above all, of sensuality. Look closely at the causes of the ignorance of the masses. You will see that the chief cause is not at all a shortage of schools and libraries, as we are used to thinking. It is the superstitions, both ecclesiastical and patriotic, with which the people are soaked, and which are produced without pause by every means art has. For the church superstitions, there is the poetry of prayers and hymns, the painting and carving of icons and statues, singing, organs, music, architecture, and even the dramatic art of the church service. For the patriotic superstitions, there are poems and stories, handed on in the schools, and music, singing, ceremonial processions, royal receptions, battle pictures, and monuments. If it were not for this ceaseless work by every branch of art to keep up the ecclesiastical and patriotic stupefaction and embitterment of the people, the masses would have reached true enlightenment long ago. But the corruption art works is not only ecclesiastical and patriotic. In our time, art is the chief cause of the corruption of people in the most important question of social life, in the relations between the sexes. We all know from ourselves, and fathers and mothers know from their children as well, what dreadful suffering of soul and body, what pointless waste of strength people go through simply because sexual desire has been let loose. Since the world has stood, from the Trojan War, which arose out of that same sexual license, down to the suicides and murders of lovers reported in almost every newspaper, a great part of the suffering of the human race has come from this source. And what happens? All art, real art and counterfeit art alike, with the rarest exceptions, is given over to nothing but describing sexual love, depicting it, inflaming it, in every one of its forms. Only think of all the novels with their lust-inflaming descriptions of love, the most refined and the coarsest alike, with which the literature of our society is packed. Think of all the pictures and statues of the naked female body, and all the filth that passes into illustrations and advertisements. Think of all the vile operas, the operettas, the songs, the romances that swarm through our world, and you cannot help feeling that the art we have has only one clear aim: to spread depravity as widely as it possibly can. These are not all the consequences of the perversion of art that has taken place in our society, but they are the surest ones. So what is called art in our society does not help humanity forward at all. It hinders the coming of good in our life more, perhaps, than anything else does. And so the question comes back to us. It is the question that presents itself to anyone who is free of the business of art, and therefore has no interest bound up with the art we have. It is the question I put at the beginning of this book. Is it just that to the thing we call art, a possession of only a small part of society, such sacrifices should be offered as are offered to it now, sacrifices of human labor, of human lives, and of morality? The answer is the natural one. No, it is not just, and it should not be. Common sense answers so, and so does the moral feeling that has not been perverted. Not only should it not be, not only should no sacrifices be offered to what we recognize as art. On the contrary, all the efforts of people who want to live well should go towards destroying this art, because it is one of the cruelest evils weighing on humanity. So if the question were put, which is better for our Christian world, to lose everything now touted as art, the false along with all the good there is in it, or to go on encouraging or permitting the art we have now, then I believe every reasonable and moral person would answer as Plato answered it for his Republic, and as all the Christian and Muslim teachers of humanity have answered it. He would say, better that there should be no art at all, than that this depraved art, or this semblance of art which we have now, should go on. Happily the question stands before no one, and no one has to decide it one way or the other. All that a person can do, and all that we, the so-called educated people, placed by our position where we can understand the meaning of what happens in our life, can do and must do, is this: to understand the error we are in, not to persist in it, and to look for the way out.